In the winter of 1144, the great Crusader city of Edessa fell in a single night. Its walls, thought impregnable for nearly half a century, were breached by tunnels and fire. When the dust settled, the balance of power in the Near East had shifted forever. The man responsible was not a caliph, not a sultan. He was a former slave soldier's son, a warlord who had clawed his way up through the chaos of a fracturing empire to become the most feared ruler in the Muslim world. His name was Imad ad-Din Zangi. And this is the story of the dynasty he built, the Zangids, the family that would set the stage for the Crusades' greatest reversal and pave the road for a man named Saladin. A world in pieces. To understand the Zangids, you first have to understand the world that made them possible. By the early 12th century, the once mighty Seljuk Empire, the Turkic power that had dominated the Islamic Middle East, was breaking apart. Sultans fought nephews. Governors fought sultans. Local strongmen called atabegs, literally father lords, were appointed as guardians and regents for young Seljuk princes, and many of these atabegs quietly built independent power bases of their own. Into this vacuum, in 1099, came an entirely new and alien threat, the Crusaders. European knights had carved out 4 Christian states along the Levantine coast, Jerusalem, Antioch, Tripoli, and Edessa, deep inside what had been Muslim territory for centuries. The Muslim world's response, for decades, was disunity. Rival emirs were often more interested in fighting each other than in fighting the Franks. That was the world Imad ad-Din Zangi was born into, and he intended to end it. The making of Zangi's father, Aq Sunker al-Hajib, had been a Seljuk governor of Aleppo, executed in a succession war when Zangi was still a boy. The son grew up in the household of a rival atabeg in Mosul, trained as a soldier from childhood, and forged in the brutal politics of frontier warfare against both Crusaders and fellow Muslims alike. By his 30s, Zangi had earned a reputation as a ruthless, disciplined commander. In 1127, the Seljuk Sultan appointed him atabeg of Mosul, nominally a regent, but in practice, an independent ruler of one of the most powerful cities in Iraq. It didn't take long for Mosul to become a launching pad. Within a year, Zangi marched west and seized control of Aleppo, the same city his father had once governed, uniting 2 of the most important power centers in the region under a single ruler for the first time in a generation. For the first time, someone had the resources, the army, and the ambition to think bigger than his own city walls, building an empire of fear and order. Zangi ruled through an unusual combination: discipline and genuine competence. Even those who despised him admitted that under Zangi's rule, trade routes became safe, taxation became predictable, and his soldiers were forbidden from looting the very population they were meant to protect. He is said to have hanged men from his own army for stealing a peasant's crops. But toward his rivals, and toward the Crusader states, Zangi showed no such restraint. Over the 1130s, he waged relentless campaigns, absorbing smaller Muslim principalities in Syria and northern Iraq one by one, sometimes through siege, sometimes through marriage alliances. Piece by piece, Zangi was doing something almost no one had managed since the early Crusades began, unifying Muslim Syria and Iraq under one sword. The fall of Edessa. In 1144, Zangi saw his opportunity. The Crusader County of Edessa, the northernmost and most exposed of the Crusader states, had been left thinly defended while its count, Jocelyn II, campaigned elsewhere. Zangi moved fast. His army surrounded the city, undermined its walls, and after 4 weeks of siege, broke through. Edessa, held by the Crusaders for nearly 50 years, fell in December 1144. The shockwave reached Europe almost immediately. Edessa's fall became the direct trigger for the Second Crusade, called by Pope Eugene III just months later. For the first time, a Muslim leader had rolled back major Crusader territory, and the entire Christian world took notice. In the Islamic world, Zangi was hailed as a hero of the faith, given the honorific title al-Malik al-Mansur, the victorious king, and remembered by many chroniclers as the man who began the counter-crusade. Death of a conqueror and a dynasty divided. Zangi would not live to see the movement he started reach its conclusion. In 1146, less than 2 years after his triumph at Edessa, he was assassinated in his own camp, murdered in his sleep by a slave he had punished, while besieging a fortress on the Euphrates. His death could have ended everything. Instead, his territory split between his sons, and one of them would prove even more consequential than his father. Nur ad-Din Mahmud inherited Aleppo, and over the following decades did what his father never fully achieved. He unified Muslim Syria, took Damascus in 1154, and framed his wars against the Crusaders explicitly as jihad, using mosques, scholars. It was Nur ad-Din who sent his general, a young Kurdish officer named Salah ad-Din, into Egypt. And it was from that expedition that Saladin would eventually rise to found his own dynasty, the Ayyubids, and recapture Jerusalem itself in 1187. The legacy of the Zangids. The Zangid dynasty itself would not last. Overshadowed and eventually absorbed by the Ayyubids that grew from within its own ranks, Zangid rule in Aleppo and Mosul faded by the early 13th century. But their historical importance is hard to overstate. Imad ad-Din Zangi was the first Muslim ruler to seriously reverse Crusader gains. His son Nur ad-Din turned that momentum into a unified, ideologically driven war effort. And together, father and son built the political and military foundation, the armies, the territory, the religious framing, that Saladin would later inherit and complete. The fires that consumed Edessa in 1144 were, in a very real sense, the first sparks of the fire that would one day retake Jerusalem.